Are you into drugs and controlled substances? Then this episode is for you. You know, when you do trade compliance and you lift a rock, sometimes you find a rabbit hole. And that's exactly what happened in this episode of the Trade Compliance Talks that I had with my newfound trade compliance friend, Welli. And Welli took me down one of the deepest rabbit hole in a very long time. He took me down the rabbit hole of the trade compliance related to drugs and controlled substances. And I knew very little of the trade compliance related to drugs and controlled substances. So I basically learned something new every minute. And I hope you will do that too. So enjoy. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Trade Compliance Podcast. And today we are talking about controlled drugs and substances, which I literally know nothing about, and especially the trade compliance parts of it. So luckily, I have my buddy Welli as a guest today on the podcast. So hi, Welli, and could you please give everyone a short introduction?
Okay, thank you, Anders, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Welli. So people call me Welli. I have a very long name, but I go with Welli. It's much easier. Yeah, and I'm a trade compliance expert working within this field for the past 8 years. I worked in companies like Amazon, Honeywell, yeah, big companies. So I'm dealing with import control for a long time. I was dealing with import control. And then I moved to, I was doing the broker management and all the stuff and classifications. And then I moved to export control as well. So then I was doing the export control work, license application, and all those things, which you could think about the export control stuffs, right? So, and recently I'm into sanctions as well. I think in trade compliance, you can get away with sanctions recently. Everyone is talking about it, right? After 2022, especially. So yeah, so overall mix of here and there, mostly with the import. And then recently, I think for the past 4 to 5 years, I'm completely into export control. Yeah. And yeah, so I was working with different control goods. And today we'll be talking about a drug precursor, let's say controlled drugs. That's a topic we'll be talking about today because it's not much spoken. It's not very common among complaints within trade complaints. So I think it's a good discussion. It will be a good discussion, and something new can be discussed in this podcast.
Sounds awesome, and I think it's going to be really interesting. At least I'm fired up.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, to kick this off, to begin with, I always ask my favorite question first, and that is, Welli, how did you end up in trade compliance?
That's a good question. Okay, so I think this is one of the questions I always even get asked by people whenever I join a company or even in an interview, right? People ask me, hey, how do you end up in trade compliance? Because it's something where you don't go to university and study about trade compliance, right? There's no subject like computer science engineering or mechanic or something. Somehow we end up here, right? So to me, I was a mechanical engineer. I started mechanical engineering, and then I did my master's in international design engineering. And that's how it is. And then I was like, okay, so I had no idea about trade complaints at the very beginning. And then the start is somehow before I was working as an engineer and dealing with some of the trade complaints people. So what did they do is they come to me, they ask me, hey, Welli, we don't know what we're working on, but we need to know what exactly this machine is or electronic products are so that they could classify or they could make an educated decision when they put that product, right? So I'm kind of a bridge between this engineering and the trade complaints. Mostly I have to work with those people. And then when it goes on, sometimes what I do is like it's a small company at the very beginning, at the beginning stage. So I know what they're gonna do after I tell them what exactly this product is about. So I was kind of sharing their work, right? So I was just kind of slowly doing the classification. That's how it started. And then I got into Amazon and then it completely different situation. So I was completely in trade compliance. So I was learning how to classify and all those things. And then that's how it started, right? So I started as an engineer, and then it turns out that right now we're doing with almost everything, right? So we have like in Amazon, anyone can sell any product in there, like almost anything. You get all the people from Chinese sellers selling all those products, which we have no idea what it is. So an engineer is needed in that case to really understand what machines or mechanical user or function will goes around in that product. And then that's how I slowly let's say transcend into a complete trade compliance person. And here, 8 years later, I'm a full-time trade compliance expert. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the most common story, that you end up in trade compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, by luck, you can say, or by a fluke. But not many people have like a childhood dream to become a trade compliance manager or something like that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to today's topics. The first headline: what are controlled drugs and substances? So what's the definition of controlled drugs and substances?
All right. So, like drug precursors is a bit more complex term to explain. So if I break it down simply, like to anyone could understand, so you might think controlled drugs, what is it? It's a very strange term. I don't understand. But actually, you might have encountered this thing on your daily life when you go to a pharmacy, or you go to a pharmacy and if you ask, hey, can I get a heroin or some cocaine? No one's going to hand it over to you, right? They say, no, you're not allowed to get. So, that's right. Right. And that's
Thankfully.
exactly right. Because it's a restricted one. It's restricted. You can't get it, right? Well, when sometimes you ask for some kind of like some specific medication, let's say you wanted to get a specific medication where you can't just go and get it in the counter. They might ask you for a prescription, right? You need to give a prescription, right? So now you have a document which allow you to buy that drugs or medication. And sometimes you can walk up to the counter and you say like, hey, can I have a painkiller? And now you don't need any document at all. So that's the first encounter you had as a controlled drug situation where certain things need some document, certain things you can get it even if you have any document. It's not allowed, right? Because it's something completely different, like it's a restricted one. And sometimes some drugs is completely easy. So when you scale this in industrial way, like in a business perspective, this is completely more complex. So the in a company, if you are having a lot of chemical and you are having a research chemical company, let's say, or any kind of chemical industry you're running, or any kind of pharmaceutical company you're running, you need to make sure that does your goods or a product fall under these controlled substance or not? Will your chemical or a product has a potential use or a potential, let's say, a potential use to create an illicit drug, right? So you might think that it's a normal drug we're using for research lab, but it turns out it's used to make a very severe abusive drug, right? So that it might have this potential. So that's why we need to that's a clear definition of control drugs. So they fall under control drugs that might need specific documentation. They might need specific registration or a licensing in order to use or procure these goods, or even to do anything with that goods.
Yeah, of course.
So you can
And
see this, like if you see the movie Breaking Bad, like that there is this DEA guy, right? So yeah, that's the guys who are controlling us, these drugs, and we need to get the permission from them. So that's exactly what it is.
yeah, that's the enforcement guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now we have like a small definition of what's a controlled substance. But how do you do the actual classification?
Exactly. So classification in terms of that one, how do we say? It's like it depends. It has a slight difference in different country. For example, in the Europe, if you go to the European Commission website, right? So you go there, Eurolax, and there is a special regulation. It's 273/2004. So if there is any link at the end of this podcast or anything, you can just do that. But if you go to 273/2004, it European Commission, so so clearly says what are the drugs which are classified and under this control goods. So they categorize into category 1, 2, and 3. So there are certain chemicals which fall under category 1, category 2, and 3. And what license do you need for that? What license you don't need? What you need to get it from the customer? What registration you need? And it also has a commodity code of this product, CAS number as well. So when it comes to chemical, CAS number is something which identify this chemical. It's like a unique identification. So you have this information. So if you go to a chemical engineer and you say, okay, so these are the material with the commodity code. There is a CAS number, which like it's like chemical. They say it's a chemical abstract service. So it's like it gives you a structural chemical structure behind it. So if you have a company, or you can just go to your engineers, chemical engineers, give them this regulation and say, hey, find out all these chemical which are connected to these cache numbers. And then if we have anything in our company, please consider those as a control goods. They can't just go sit around in the warehouse and go anywhere to the customer without proper documentation. So that's the first thing you need to do. Classify it based on the regulation. And when it comes to US, it's also a little bit different. So it, the chemicals are the same, but you need to find the different regulation in the US as well. So you can get it from the DEA website, or you can get it from the Code of Federal Regulation, ecfr.gov. So you can get it from them as well. So there they listed the same thing, like list 1 chemical, list 2 chemical. So they have specifically in their website, and you can find exact information and there. Give it to your chemical engineers and they would classify it. So that's how it's classified.
Do they, in the US, does the substances fall in under the EAR or the ITAR, or is it a separate regulation?
It's a separate one. So it's nothing to do with ITAR or ER. Sometimes some of the chemical might be falling under both, let's say dual use, and also in drug precursor. So you might have, like, for example, there are materials which could have a kind of a potential, like there are even similar material. Let's say like there's hydrofluoric acid, which is a dual use, and hydrochloric acid, which is a drug precursor. So it's there could be some of the material which are a little bit similar, or even like they can overlap into both of them. So where it is classified both into a dual use, or even ITAR, or even for a drug precursor. But they have a separate distinct for that, separate classification you have to maintain. So you can maintain in any ERP in whichever your company has here anywhere. You have to maintain it and put up certain block into that system where people come into play. They check why it is blocked and then release it based on the document required.
Really interesting. Yeah. And how's the trend? Are there any recent changes or trends in how substances are classified?
Trends in a sense, for example, as I said in the beginning, that there is this CAS number when we have, let's take one example. We have the toluene or acetone. Let's say acetone is one of the chemical which you could find acetone in nail polish remover or everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
these are the chemicals which could be used for commercial purpose. But then they are the precursor to make or manufacture some illicit drugs. So it could be a precursor for something else. So you need this to make a drug out of anything. So that's why they are controlling these chemical. It's a precursor. So, and then the recent trends, how it is if it's literally acetone, 100%, we know we could just, we can restrict it or we can regulate it. But what if it's 50% acetone and 50% something else? Or it's 49% something and 51%. So now we are in a confusion because we can't really know that the regulations are not very clear on when do we draw the line between now, okay, this percentage and we are above, now it's a drug precursor, and below it's not. So we don't really know about it. So recently what happens is the companies or the country, every regulations they're kind of adding more annexure to it to make sure that we understand a little bit more on a bit more specifics on mixture of these goods. Yeah, so those are the one which you have to look into.
Really interesting. So the acetone that for example I can buy in the store, it's not the same. It's not the same. What do you call it? Cast number as that drug precursor. I'm guessing.
It is if you're getting pure acetone, then yes, it's
okay.
But if it's mixed with something else, then you can't put a CAS number at all. So there won't be any CAS number, right?
Right.
Now you're like kind of confused. What do we do? Like if the mixture of it, then what do we do, right? So that's where recently there are more confusions on how do we handle these things. And we have to get into more regulation, talk to the licensing authorities and ask to these drug enforcement authorities on how do we manage this. Yeah.
Oh, really interesting. I'm learning a lot already. So I think this is awesome.
Hey, cool.
So moving on to the import and export aspect of the controlled substances, how do the rules for exporting and importing controlled substances vary across different countries? Are they harmonized or how does it work?
So, for example, they do vary in different countries. Like, as we said already, the classification is a little bit different in Germany or in the Europe, and classification is a little bit different in, in the US. But the materials are the same. For example, in the US, the drugs are scheduled into 5 different categories, actually. Schedule 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Schedule 1 is the one which are like very hard substances. Like, for example, the marijuana, cocaine, heroin, lysergic acid, like this LSD, and all those things, they are Schedule 1. So there is no way you can just justify these are used for research, chemical, or laboratory purpose. They are a potential use to illicit drugs. And then Schedule 2 are a little bit less potential to use that. And Schedule 3 are like Xanax or Valium and all those things where you need a prescription, right? So you can't just, it's like for anxiety. So it still has some potential to use it as a drug abuse substance, but not really, right? So, and then you have 4 and 5. So in the US, they have this, when it comes to drug scheduling, they have this 5. But when it comes to enforcing it into a law where you need certain documentation to export and import, they are categorized only into 2, list 1 and list 3, list 1 and list 2. So every time you have to export these products around the country, you have certain rules and regulations. So you might need an import permit, you might need an export permit, you might need just a trade registration certificate from the custom, and that's it. And you can send it. So it could be the same product. Let's say the example like acetone, right? So let's say we're exporting acetone from Germany to Sweden, and then same acetone from Germany to Turkey, right? Or sorry, Saudi Arabia. And then the same acetone from Europe to US. And now we have 3 different cases, same material. And then to send this acetone from Germany to Sweden, I don't need any document. I can just send it. Just like we ask for a painkiller in the store. There's no need, because that's how the political friendliness and, there is a category there is a chart where there are certain countries where this drug trafficking and all the drug abuse cases are very high, where you need a lot of licenses, documentation, and takes really long time to even get this document. For example, Venezuela, Colombia, some of the South American countries are really having trouble. If you're a company who are handling drugs or chemical in South America, you will have really tough time in exporting or importing goods because the regulations are very strict. Yeah. So, and if I export the same acetone to Turkey or let's say US, I only need an import permit or an importer license from the customer in the US. They need to get it from the DEA office, Department of Justice, and that's it. So once they have that one, I can send it. And if I wanted to send it to Turkey, then that's a different case. I need an import permit, and I have to apply for an export permit, just like you apply an export permit for any ITAR controlled product or dual use or anything. You have to apply for an export permit here in Germany, and you have to apply it in the licensing authority. You have to wait for 2 weeks until 6 months, right? Depends on which country you're applying. It takes time. And then once you have it, then you send the goods. So it's the same material for different countries, different rules.
Sounds like another rabbit hole of trade compliance.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So it's more fun every day.
Yeah, well, it is, actually. I think you already have answered the next one.
Okay.
Examples of how these regulations can differ from different countries. Like you said, some countries doesn't require a license at all, and in some instances you need both an export license and as well
And then
an
import
import
permit.
license.
Yeah.
Yes. But how would you describe the biggest challenges faced by companies due to these differences between different countries?
Yeah, as I said, right? Regulation. Sometimes we have a very good company who's in Peru, right? We have a company like, let's say, I worked with a company in Peru, and they're a really nice company. There's no problem. There's no problem with the record keeping, and everything is fine. But just because their location demographically, their location is in the Peru, and then they don't have a very good track record when it comes to drug trafficking and all those things, this company is suffering because we have to wait for 4 or 5 months to get the license. And they could prove they need an import permit. They need an import permit from their country, and then even in Peru, the authorities are not giving. Even for Brazil, let's say, like Brazil is also one of the country which are affected because of this regulation, and they get an import permit only for 4 months in their company, in their country, right? The licensing authority use only for 4 months, and then they give it to me, and then when I apply for an export permit, I wait for 3 months or 4 months to get an. By the time the license which the customer provided is already almost expiring. And so then we need to think about the logistics. It takes a lot of time. So we have to think about it. So it's like a never ending story. Like you can never catch up to get this product procured, right? So these are one of the problems. So because of this one, they have to find someone where they could procure locally, or they might have to pay more money, right? So it takes more time, and time, money, and all the effort, and it's almost for what, like, this is one of the problem where companies are facing. And sometimes they might have a big shipments with, let's say, the whole shipment, there's one product which might be a drug precursor, and then the whole truck is kind of waiting for that. Like when we communicate, if they don't know how long they have to wait. They're like, okay, let's wait for another 1 week. Maybe we get it, and they wait and they don't get it. So now you have to decide, should I take this one product out of the warehouse and then send the rest of the thing out, or we need to wait for the whole thing so we save some money in the transportation. Right? It's all the different challenges we were getting actually.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, given the licensing expiring issues, that I'm guessing it's more common with individual licenses rather than general licenses.
Exactly, right? So, for example, in drug precursor, you might have this general licenses. Sometimes you have like a multiple transactional licenses, but as I said, there's categories, category 1, 2, 3. So in Germany or in European Union, category 1 is a very severe category where can really just use it to normal research purpose. It's very highly controlled. So I would recommend any company to keep away from this, like stay away from this category. If you happen to have one of these product in your portfolio, it's not worth the risk. It takes more time and stuff. So it's not advisable to do business with these chemicals. But then category 2 and 3 are a little bit lenient, so you now don't need a lot of documents. So for category 2, you can't apply for any multi-transaction license. You have to get one export permit for every single shipment. So you can just use it again and again, right? So that's also a problem. So it's restricted.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that it works that way, because global free trade of these substances wouldn't be very nice, I guess.
Definitely.
But when it comes to documentations, what documentations do you need to have these export licenses and so on for these substances?
Okay, so again, like it differs from different country, right? So if I try, like, let's say we're doing trade in the US, you just need if you're trading within the US, then you just need a license from like our Department of Justice, Drug Enforcement Administration. Get one license, and then you get a registration number, DEA registration. So when you have this document, you can just get it you can source it from locally in the US. But if you wanted to import it from other country, let's say European Union, so now what happened is the exporter from the European Union, they need to get this document done. And depends on what kind of material it is. If it is acetone, which is category 3, you don't need any documentation, as I said before. You just need a kind of an import permit or a registration. But if it's a category 2, let's say, there is example is acetic potassium permanganate. This is actually category 2, where it's highly controlled, has more potential to as a drug use case. Now you need an export permit from Germany as well, even if it's going to US. So we need to get this document from the US company, the DEA license, and submit along with this one, create an application. And then submit to German licensing authorities and then wait for it. So if you're selling it within European Union, you just need an end user declaration. For example, if you, Anders, is getting it from me right now and you wanted to have a potassium permanganate, what I do is I just please fill this end use declaration telling me that you wouldn't use it to any drug abuse or any other thing. And then just a piece of paper, sign it, and then you have a letterhead, and that's it. That's enough for me. And this is valid for 12 months, and I can use this for the next 12 months and then do business with you.
Yeah, and then you have like a license that works for that period of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how it is.
Yeah.
So generally, it's like import permit, export permit, and use declaration. These are 3 documentation we're talking about when it comes to this drug precursor world.
Yeah. And how do normally companies ensure that they have all the necessary paperwork in order? I mean, many companies dealing with hardware, for example, have their, for example, ERP systems or SAP or something like that.
Yeah. So at the beginning, like as I said, you need to make sure that you need to check your inventory if there is any drugs which are falling under these category. And if it's yes, so that's why you need to put it in when it comes to material flow, right? When you have a new material and then they are doing the R&D and then it comes into your ERP system, the first thing you have to do is to analyze and see if this falls under the same like dual use or drug precursor or anything. If it has an ITAR control, like any regulatory, if it's a restricted product, you need to identify it and then set aside and then discuss with the trade compliance team at the very beginning. You see these are falling under those areas, then ask to trade compliance. That's the first thing you have to do and see what I have to do. Is there anything else? Do we have to put a block onto these materials or not? So it's very important that they control at the very beginning and not at the very end, right? So there is a control system in your ERP. And when it comes to documentation, then trade compliance will suggest if we need a license or not. Because sometimes some companies, for example, most of the cases where they make mistakes is some materials, let's say category 3 acetone, you don't need a license to operate within Germany or within European Union, Sweden, anywhere. If you wanted to send it across your own domestic states, right, you don't need it. So you will, at the beginning, you get this market. And then slowly you think, okay, maybe I can just go export it some other country. But then you didn't realize that you might need trade license. You need to contact with these companies and have it. So since you don't have any problem, you might expand your business there, and then you will have problems. So that's why I need to see, talk to export control team. And then, for example, in the EU Commission, in the 2003, 2004, in the regulation, in the very beginning, I think it's Article 3, it says the first point, it says you need to have a dedicated export compliance officer on site if you have these products who will be informing anything, any new changes or anything to the concerned authority, something. So it's a mandatory thing where someone is dealing with these material, their company should have one person who's responsible for handling these basic basic substances or control. Yeah. So if you don't have it, then it's a problem already. Right? Mostly.
Yeah, make perfectly sense.
Yeah. So it's literally in the regulation, right? So hire someone and have someone for this position. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you made a really important point there. Just because you have, for example, a substance or generally in trade compliance, when you have anything that goes no license required to a certain destination, it's not license. It's not no license required
For
anywhere.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It always depends on the destination. The destination is often key to decide if something goes no license required or if you need a license. So it's a pretty important aspect that you pointed out there.
Yeah, the companies recently are getting into this thing that they know it, like, compliance. The compliance is getting better, like stronger and stronger as we speak every day. The regulations are getting more, there are more number of regulations coming in as we speak, right? So the technology is developing, there's AI coming, and there is more regulation for that. So it only keeps piling up more and more. So we need more compliance officer in every company. So that's something which I recommend to have a proper compliance team who deals with these products when it comes to any restricted or regulated product, or source it from outside.
Yeah. Well, you need to have it anyway.
Exactly.
So moving on to responsible authorities for export licenses for these types of substances. You mentioned already that the responsible authorities in the US isn't the ordinary Commerce Department or Department of State. But who are the responsible authorities for providing export licenses for controlled substances, for example, in Europe?
So in Europe, we have 28 member state, I guess, right? So every state has different licensing authorities. So it's not one person for the whole European Union. So they have this Drugs and Narcotics Commission, like they have like all together. But for example, in Germany, we have this. It's a very strange name. In the short, you can call BfArM. It's Bundesinstitut for Medicine and Products. So it's in short, you can call BfArM. So they are taking care of all the drugs and medicine product, and you have to apply the license and registration with them, and they will give you the registration. So, and it be valid for 3 years, so you can have this license. But if you're a good company where you have AEOs and other licenses, and then you might get a unlimited validity of this license. They will do some audits as well, so you can have it. And to them, you will apply for an permit. You have to fill in the application, enter whoever is the destination country, what is the material, and then send it to them, and they will provide you the And the same goes to Sweden. You have your own drug precursor, drug enforcement administration, where they will provide you the document. And in the UK, it's a little bit different, right? So they are away from, so they have to do with the Home Office. They have this Home Office of, I think they in the UK, it's also for it. It's called the Firearm and Drug Unit. So it's in the Home Office division, and it's Firearm and Drug Unit. So you have to apply and get a license from them. And the US, we already know we have this DEA from Department of Justice, right? So apply a license for that, and they will give you for 1 year validity. They won't give it for more. So every year, someone who's in the plant, someone who's in the site has to reapply this and get it again. And it's not free. It costs money as well. So then the US, you have to pay $1,850 every single year just to get this license, right? So it is not free.
No, definitely
Yeah.
not.
Exactly.
But
So
yeah, but would you say that the general how it works in the majority of the countries, it's a separate authority for these types of
Exactly.
export licenses? Yeah.
It's a separate authority. It's a completely different one. It is not connected to anything related. I mean, for in the US, it is still, in the US, we have different states, right? So Department of States, Department of Commerce, Justice, like everything, everyone is having separate. They take some piece of cake from all over it, right? So they have different one, and in Germany, they all fall under the same federal institute, but still for dual use, it's a different authority. And then for drug precursor, it's completely different. They don't talk to each other. They're completely different, right? They work with the same customs, right? But they are completely different.
All right. And through the different authorities, is there any difference in times of timelines and so on, lead times for getting a license? Is there any country that stands out in either way?
So I would say that previously, like many years ago, like 5, 6 years ago, you still need to go apply it digitally, like manually. You have to fill in the application and then send it by post, right? But now in the US, it's all digital. You can apply digitally, and in the UK, you can apply digitally. Germany is still in the Stone Age, right? So we still like papers, so we're still filling up in the paper and sending it out. But Germany is also adapting into online system. They have this new system for BFAM where it's going to be live next year. So I was expecting to be this year and last year actually. So it's been there for a long time. So where we going to apply for this, get it by online, but still we don't have it. But at the end of the day, when you ask about the timeline, the online application always wins, right? You don't have to apply physically, send a post and get it. But again, at the end of the day, it's all about the destination and the material and quantity, where you're sending it to, right? I have seen getting an application from Germany to Switzerland and then getting this license in 1 week, 2 weeks, or even less than. I have seen license which I got it in 5 days, let's say, right?
Mhm.
But then there are like countries I have applied for license, like Saudi Arabia, where I have to wait for 4 months.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So I don't know. It's always different, and sometimes some cases you don't even have a license. You can't get a license. You apply and you wait, and we wait, and then many months, and then the customer is like, okay, now I'm not gonna get it from you. I'm gonna cancel it, right? So it always depends on which country you are sending it to. So it's not really depends on which authority you are dealing.
Yeah, no, I'm guessing you have a great point there. It's all about the destination and licensing authorities. Of course, they do some due diligence of the proposed recipient of your export, and different recipients take different long time to validate. Yes, yeah. But I started a company right now and felt that controlled substances sounds like a fun business. How can I learn to navigate the landscape of exporting and importing controlled substances? Is there any guidelines or something like that?
Yeah, of course, it depends on which country you are, because we need to go to the regulation and check what is a procedure. Like in the Europe, it's very good because it's all structured. It's like more than 20 pages. Everything's structured, what to do. I say, including how you need to hire an employer, like so to employee for a export control officer who's dealing with that, and then how to classify and all those things. They have everything mentioned clearly. And the good thing is in Europe, all the licensing authorities, they're very how friendly. You ask a question, hey, I have a question. What do I do? I had no idea what to do. But as long as you don't export it and you have a question, they are very much happy. They ask for the, let's say what is this thing called? The complete formula of your chemical. There's a good name. I forget it. Anyways, so you send this document of your chemical, which has a composition and a chemical structure and formulas and everything. And then there is a separate team of chemical engineers in these licensing authorities, and they will look into it and they take the time to actually answer all the questions. So that is very good thing we have here. I'm not really sure how it is in the US. Maybe the workload is high, and I'm not sure. But in the Europe, I have experience where every time you have a doubt, you ask them and then they do it. You get an answer in a week. So that's one thing where everyone has to utilize. You are starting a company, you don't know, you ask, don't do anything, right?
Mm.
And then once that's done, it's always starting from the whole state. Like you're in Sweden, if you're having a company, just find a customer within Sweden because it's easy. Then slowly scale it up to European Union and go outside, right? Slowly, not instantly, because you know the market, you understand the risk. And then when you have this ERP system scheduled and everything is running perfectly, you do the trial and error and everything is fine, then go take a long step, right? Not right away. Okay, I'm going to ship everything to China right now, tomorrow, and see how it goes. Oh, not that way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, talking about that types of, what do you call it, unfortunate transactions, what would the consequences be of exporting these types of substances without top documentation?
All right. So that's a risky one, right? So yeah, so we don't want to talk about it at all, always, right? Let's assume always everything goes fair. But if by any chance you accidentally do it, there's many cases where it could happen. Doesn't matter how well you control. There's always a chance that it might happen somehow, right? So you need to try to hope it doesn't happen. So let's say you have a product, you send it to from Germany to any country, let's say Saudi Arabia or
Yeah.
Egypt or Turkey, right? You send it, but where you need a license and you accidentally send it to them, and the consequences, like there are two different categories. One is an intentional crime, right?
Mhm.
Is it an
Yeah.
intentional, accidental, right? Non-intentional, right? So most cases, most company, it won't be an intentional, right? So hopefully you don't have a connection with the cartel in the Mexico that you're supplying it to them. So hopefully it's not the case. But let's say it's a non-intentional, it's an accident. You send the goods to any other company, and the first thing you have to do is do a voluntary disclosure. You have it
Yeah.
and do it. So you do a voluntary disclosure already. The severity gets a little bit lower. It's not that intense as when they find out in the audit, right? But even if you do a voluntary disclosure, the risk is like at the very beginning, based on my experience, if you do it in the very first time, it always comes with a warning. They say, okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
look, you did it. There's an intention. It's not intentional. You did it. And then now you need to give a corrective actions. What are the corrective actions you have taken so that this thing doesn't happen next time? And then if you have those in place, I mean, my recommendation is always when you submit this volunteer disclosure, already have your corrective actions, put it there, and then you describe everything there. So this happened because of this. Now we have this one so that it doesn't happen in the future, and then submit it. And most probably you can get away with a warning or maybe a small fine. That's how it is.
Mhm.
But then let's say you reach that cases, right? Now you're not talking about whether you're doing a repeated crime. So you did the same thing again, right? So if and then let's say you do what second or third time, then it's a bit severe, right? You might lose a
Mhm.
trade registration document. Like remember, I was saying that you need to apply this trade registration
Mhm. Yeah.
certificate in local member state. You might lose that privilege, right? It could be a temporary lock of that. So, for example, you might not able to use this license for the next 3 months or 6 months or 1 year until you have a proper corrective actions. There will be an audit and they will check it, and then you might get it back, right? So that's a big problem when it comes to the business, right? So you need to see how much you are supplying these goods and you're trading with, or you're doing a business with this product. And now from that day onwards, let's say the next whatever months, you're not able to procure the goods. You're not allowed to the goods which you have it in the warehouse, it's fine, but you can't take it out or you can move it in,
Mm.
right? So there's no way you can do any business with that. So that's a big problem. And then you can have a penalty as well. They have to pay. So sometimes you can never, I haven't seen this case anywhere where you can never get the license back or having a penalty. like depends on the company as well. In Germany, as I said, in the European Union, the very first thing they did is you need to appoint an ECO, like export control officer, right? Now you sign this document in the drug enforcement authorities that you are responsible for that. So in the future, if something happens, something goes wrong, your company doesn't receive a letter, you receive it. Says like you are the only person who's responsible for that because you said you will take care of it. Now what went wrong? So now it's not the company, it's you. So these are the regulations which changes in their different countries. Yeah. So in Germany, that's how it is. Germany, you can't have the whole company taking the blame. You have to point out exactly which team and who is responsible for that. That's why it's very important. So if the whole company, like not anyone can go, if you have a license in your company, which allows you to trade these goods, randomly any people cannot apply for an export permit. It should be exactly this person who is registered with them at the very beginning. So it's a very risk when it comes to this one because no one wants to take a blame, right? Something goes wrong, something goes crazy in the logistics, and then the responsible person is actually the export compliance officer, right? Of course, the company is going to support you by giving a lawyer and all those things, but you need to be very, very careful. So to when it comes to these kind of substances.
Yeah, and it sounds pretty scary.
Exactly, right?
Basically, it's your own ass that gets fried in this case.
Exactly, right? So tying up with that, so it's not that easy. So you need to provide your passport details and all those things. There'll be a background verification done by the licensing authorities on you. So your nationality come into play, where you're from, and all those things. So you need to give your private address to the licensing authorities. So it's a bit personal, actually. So
Giving it a second thought, I'm not going to start a company dealing with controlled substances.
it is risky, actually. Yeah, it is risky. And there's not a lot of materials online where you could study about and see what it is, right? So it's very rare. Not many people talk about it. We always see people talking about ITAR controlled, right? So sanctions, dual use EAR, and all those things. Like, but the drug precursor is something very very unspoken, right? So
Yeah, well, in the light of this, whatever there from you, ITAR is pretty vanilla in comparison.
nice. Yeah, but like there are countries like Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru. There is there is a lot of drug. Like for example, the cocaine is very common in there. They have this cocoa plant, and then they mass production and all those things. And you need these like when you talk about drug precursor, so it's a precursor, right? So it is something which is a precursor to actual drug which are used for a drug base. So they made these like potassium permanganate or acetone or toluene or diethyl ether, butanol. These are all drug precursor product, and they need some of these product to turn this cocoa seed into cocaine. So that's why the drug like EU and United Nations they come up together and then they put all these materials which could be a potential use of potential use of drug, and then they kind of controlling these traffic across the world, right? So that the drug abuse will go down, drug trafficking will go down. Yeah.
When you talked about having that, I'd like to call it a trade license, that could actually, to have that possibility to trade, to have that possibility revoked, could actually be the bigger consequence compared to the actual fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that would basically put you out of business for a period of time, or definitely. So I think many times you just look at the fine and think that that's a really hefty fine, but actually having the license revoked for, or the possibility to trade revoked for like a month, that could be devastating for most businesses, I think.
Exactly. And then the problem is, they say like, okay, from this day, you are not allowed to do any business. But then now there is this momentum of business happening already. And then how do you put a stop to it? You can say, okay, tomorrow is the day when I don't have the license because it's a license got revoked. And from tomorrow, I'm not going to release any orders which are falling in this category. But what about things which you have released in the past week, which has a delivery date planned, or like a PGI, which is planned the next month? So now you can control these physical logistic things, which is very impossible actually, because somebody in the warehouse is moving these boxes physically because they have this delivery node and they are just moving it out. But you don't have any control over it. So these physical things you can't have So there will be some kind of a buffer zone, let's say, in the very beginning of this license review period, where you
Yeah.
might miss few orders which went through anyways, right? And then that will lead into even more problem because you made a transaction of drug precursor while you don't have the license for it. So now it's like an inception, right? So it's a problem with a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
So it's even it gets worse. Yeah.
Yeah, things are already in motion, and it's like stopping a oil tanker. It's not just, you can't just pull the handbrake and expect
Yeah.
it to stop right away.
Right.
But what steps can companies take to mitigate these risks of non-compliance? I'm guessing training, education is a big part of it.
Definitely, right? So have somebody have it into your learning portfolio. If you have a big company, most of the companies have this learning platform within the company itself where you can learn about how to handle these things. Get these to your engineers to make sure that they classify everything perfectly, and do an internal audit every time, right? Do an internal audit, see if there's any gaps or compliance breaches, and do it right, like always. And also when it comes to license application, right? So make sure that many companies apply for an export permit without an import permit because they think it's not my job, it's a company, it's an importer's responsibility. Why do I need an import permit? I just need to apply for an export permit and then do it. But it turns out that the licensing authorities, it's not their job to track your customer and get the license on behalf of you. Then they come back to you, you apply for it, and then now it takes more time as well. So these are also a problem. And sometimes the worst case is, there is a license cost associated to this one as well. Like, for example, each license in Germany costs 100 euros to 200 euros. If it's a multi-transactional license, it's 200 euros. If it's not, it's 100 euros. But the problem is, let's say you're having a shipment, you're sending it to an university in the UK, and then they wanted to buy acetone one bottle, and it's cost like $5, and you're like, okay, so you bill it, and that's it. But then end of the day, to send this product, you need an export permit, and like
Hmm.
acetone doesn't need it, let's say, but other material like potassium permit, let's say, for that you need a license, and the actual product might cost $5, where the license is $100. So in total, it's $105. But so you're kind of losing the business doing this, right?
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you're putting this in the invoice. You need to communicate in the ERP system as well. So when it comes to this procurement team, you need to tell them to the sales team, and they do the sales pitch. They need to tell that, hey, you're procuring these goods from us. Remember, it's always better for you to buy it in the bulk because no matter how much quantity you buy, it's always like 100 euros. So if you buy small batches, then you're losing something, right? So some companies don't even account this money at all, and they are kind of doing a business by losing it somewhere else, right? So you need to make sure to tell this upfront. So those are the kind of a best practices you have to like counter in and factor in when dealing with the drug precursors.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question to ask you to describe some best practices. But looking past that, in my sheet notes, what common mistakes should companies be aware of?
Common mistake is, for example, the very severe mistakes, even if it's a common mistake. I talked about this, not getting an import permit, like not having an import permit, but you apply for an export permit, where then they come back and it take some time to do it, right? So that's one issue. And then the number two is this is very serious that every company has to take care of, which it could be applied for not even for drug precursor, it can be for a dual use or any other product, right? Let's say you have an permit which has a validity starting from last month and then ending by the end of this month, like 31st of March as we speak, right? And then you have a license until this day, and you have released everything, so everything is fine. You settled it, and now it's in the loading docking state. It's they are loading it in the truck, and they wanted to deliver. And this is going to Turkey or any other country, and they have the license and everything. And because due to some reasons, they don't want to drive the truck today because it is not completely filled. The customer don't want to pick it up. They say, okay, let's fill up the whole truck so that it saves. And then they just moved this thing to the next few days. Like now we have a vacation, right? So they moved it to 2nd of April, right? So now what happened is your license is already expired, and you wouldn't even know. There's no way you control it. So everything in the software side, ERP side, is clear. It's just in the very end, and then that's where the problem is. Right now, you take it out of the warehouse and you deliver it and you go to the customs in the border and now you're delivering a product to a country with an expired license. So how do you fix that? Right?
Yeah. No,
It could happen. And this could happen to any material. It can be a dual use or anything. So this is why you need to make sure that you have a compliance control until the very last period. If there is any changes, you need to make sure that it will go back to the very start, like whoever it is releasing the block, whoever is handling the trade complaints people, like port control officer, who needs to get somehow there should be a connection from the very last moment, like when the guy is taking a box and putting into the moving the pallet into the truck. And if he changes his mind, I'm not gonna do it today because I got a phone from somebody, not do it, right? Then he has to go back to the whole stage, like check the license, whatever the license you have, it might not be valid the next day. So get back to the trade complaints people, get back to the export control, and they need to try to get this kind of a communication platform or like so there should be some kind of communication coming back to you if there is any changes in the very last moment.
Yeah. Really good point there. Your responsibility isn't over until the package arrives at the recipient. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, point taken. And I am all out of questions. We've reached the end of my notes, but before we land the plane, I have a last question for you.
All right.
If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do?
All right. So they can contact me by my email. So it's Diaz Welling, DIAZWELLING @gmail.com. They can contact me. And so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask to me. It's all openly available, right? So there is nothing confidential. Anyone can go in and then check it. But it's always great to talk to people who has similar experience, right? Maybe somebody has more knowledge with truck breakers than me. They want to talk to me and I get to know something more, right? So it's cool. And I'm happy if anyone wants to contact me.
Yeah, that's great. I think this has been an awesome conversation and I have learned something new every minute of it. So I think it's been really awesome. So thank you, Welli. This has been a ton of fun and really valuable. And I'm sure that others will value it as much as I did or do.
Thanks so much, Anders. It was pleasant and lovely talking to you. And thank you again for having me in this platform. Feeling very grateful to be here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And I'll happy to have you on some time.
Other times maybe.
Future. Yes.
Exactly. All right. So have a great day, everyone, whoever is listening to this. And yeah, that's it from my side.
Over and out. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.